Hello and welcome to another episode of the Borderline Dad podcast. Thank you for tuning in today. If you don't know, I was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder and depression. I have two kids, one with autism, one with dyspraxia. In starting this whole podcast journey, my initial goal was to share my experiences, my stories, my thoughts and feelings on things, and make other people feel not so alone. I know what it's like to feel absolutely, completely, utterly alone and misunderstood, and like there's no light at the end of the tunnel, and I never want any other person ever to feel that way. So my goal is to do the best that I can to make that happen, to make people feel not so alone. Eventually, after a few months, I moved into other areas of mental health. I talk about self-care, I talk about triggers, I talk about a lot of different things, talk about various disorders. Now, I want mental health to be taken as seriously as a black eye, as serious as a broken bone, a burst appendix, something like that. I also want to erase the stigma around asking for help, reaching out to a friend or a family member or a professional. I want to thank you all for being here today. Whether it's your first time or your 1,000,000th time, I really do appreciate you being here. It means more to me than I could ever accurately express. I hope you enjoy the episode, and again, thank you for being here. So today I want to talk a little bit about my children. What is it like parenting with BPD? Their experiences, my experiences. I'm just gonna kind of go into a little bit about what I was like pre and post kids, who I was kind of hanging out with and some of the things I did. Some of the things I'm going to talk about in this podcast, I have only ever told maybe 3 people, 4 people, a very small group. But yeah, here we go. I had never wanted kids when I was younger. The very thought was horrifying to me. And I laughed at the notion of ever being a dad. I would watch shows like Nanny 911, Super Nanny, and I would just, fret and cringe at the idea of having a little monster like one of the monsters on that show. I'll never forget the day when I first found out I was going to be a father. It was actually the day before Father's Day. It was the day before Father's Day, 2012, and we had gone to one of my friend's high school graduations, and I had already graduated, so going back was a bit weird, but it was for a friend, so it was okay. We were on our way home from the graduation, and my partner and I had stopped at a store, and we had picked up Father's Day cards and for my dad and stepdad, and what I didn't know was she also picked up a pregnancy test, and she had taken it at home. She was upstairs. We lived with my parents still. Excuse my voice today. I'm a bit of a cold. So she found out the day before Father's Day, and in the middle of me being scared shitless, crapping my pants, my only other thought was, like, you couldn't have waited a day? Like, how cool would it have been to find out you're going to be a dad on Father's Day? But anyway, I was scared. I was a loser. I was a big loser. I hadn't had a stable job. All my jobs at that point were seasonal, temporary, and I didn't even have my own car. I was in no position to be a father, but my carelessness had consequences, and I had to deal with it. Before I had kids, I was hanging out with what my parents would call the wrong crowd. And looking back on it, it definitely wasn't like, I don't know. Looking back on it, I had a great time. It was definitely an adjustment. I wanted to be cool. But my idea of cool wasn't hanging out with like the popular kids, the football players, the cheerleaders.
my idea of cool was essentially hanging out with the cliques known as goths, or occasionally the burnouts / stoners, which I'll get into in a minute here. I never really belonged to a clique. I never really had friends. I never felt like I fit in anywhere. A lot of people in my high school really identified with a certain group of, like a certain musical group or genre. You had country kids. They only listen to country music. You had the Panic at the Disco kids. You had the heavy metal. It was very music centric. My junior year of high school, I had signed up for culinary arts at another high school, one block a day. I would take a bus over with all the other kids, and we'd all be taking these extra special classes at another high school. You had the automotive kids, the computer kids, the kids that wanted to be nurses. It was a really good mix of kids. I was the only boy from my high school that did culinary arts. It was me and a few other girls from high school. I loved cooking and, of course, eating food. So it was only natural for me to join culinary arts. I wanted to do more than just follow directions on a box or microwave things. I wanted to really experiment and learn how to cook. I was very excited. I had to apply, so when I got accepted, I was very ecstatic. So one day, while I was riding this bus, this girl was talking to me about how her boyfriend was wearing a shirt idolizing a certain clown band. He wasn't even a fan and was just trying to be cool, and that had upset her, and she was talking to me about it. I had never heard of these clowns before, so I Googled them. I kind of listened to their music, what they were about, their message, and I fell in love. I really did. I knew that I wanted to be part of this family or this group of people, because everything that they did, or most things that they did, I should say not everything, but I really love their music. They were anti-bullying, anti-hate. They really got a bad rap. I became full-on obsessed with this clown group. I started buying the merch, the clothes, painting my face, listening to the music. My first tattoo that I ever got was actually the band's symbol on my upper shoulder, or my shoulder. The style of clothing landed me in a weird goth / stoner mix clique. I wasn't a stoner, but I definitely liked the goth style, and I actually ended up really liking some of the people that I hung out with. I met my best friend through this band's clothing. I was walking through the hall one day, and some random girl comes up to me and says, "Dude, I love your pants," and gave me a hug, and the rest is history. It was a bit of an adjustment. I hadn't been used to hanging out with friends, and she didn't know it at the time, but my senior year of high school, she was my first real friend that actually gave a shit about me and hung out with me outside of school. It was the first time I ever actually had gone to someone's house and hung out with someone as a friend, and it was really weird, but it was really cool at the same time. She really changed my life. I wouldn't have said this at the time, but some of the people that we ended up hanging out with and some of the things that we did, I was certainly not a fan of. Not even a little. At least not at first, like I said, it was an adjustment. Once I got invited to a party, and there ended up being a lot of pot at this party, a lot of weed, the devil's lettuce, as they call it. What I did not know at the time, before I partook in a fairly large amount of this weed, for the first time and the last time, was that it was laced with cocaine. I guess they call it chronic. I don't know, but the weed slowed my heart rate down. I felt like, and the coke was speeding it up, and my heart genuinely felt like it was going to explode. I I had tried smoking cigarettes a few times before that. I just couldn't get into it. I didn't care for the taste. It made me paranoid, and it's just not something I wanted to mess with. And now I was about to do drugs. Like I said, it didn't end well. It felt like my heart was going to explode. Since then, I've never touched this stuff. I've been offered it many times. And I want to say that I have nothing against the people who smoke pot for any reason. I really don't. It's just not for me. Hanging out with this particular group of friends did open me up to other friend groups. Going to this party, I started to make friends in other cliques, and they started to recognize me as someone that was not like cool, but like it greatly reduced the bullying that happened. And my senior year was very easy compared to the rest of my school career as far as bullying goes. Excuse me. I apologize. Greatly reducing the bullying, it definitely almost made everything kind of all worthwhile. Hanging out with this group also led to a lot of drinking for my friends, my partner. I never drank during this time. I was always the designated driver, which was okay by me. I couldn't get into this stuff at the time. Hanging out with these people is when I played strip poker for the first time, which was fun and interesting, but it was awkward. It wasn't as pleasant as one would imagine. I played with it was my partner and it was a friend of mine, the friend that had given me a hug, and another guy. And the guy that we were playing with was my friend's boyfriend and my partner's ex. So it was just the four of us, and we all ended up naked. And it's strip poker. So I only played, I think, that once. I never really cared for it. Like I said, it was fun at first, but it was just as many ups and downs as we had while hanging out with my best friend, who will remain nameless like everyone else. I love those times. I loved her as a best friend. I consider her family, and I wouldn't change anything. She was my first real actual friend, like I said, and I'm proud to say that she still is, to this day, one of my closest and dearest friends. We have been friends now for, about 10 years? Yeah, I've been friends about 10 years now. Wow. Though, when my now ex-wife found out that she was pregnant, things had changed. I couldn't exactly hang out with the same group I had been, and naturally we drifted apart. We were still best friends, but I definitely couldn't hang out with the same people or do the same things we used to do. It was for the safety of my partner, the unborn baby. I had a kid at 20, very young, and looking back on it now, though, it was the best thing that ever happened to me. Becoming a father in my situation wasn't easy. I was lucky enough to have an army of people by our side. And it was still rough, but totally worth it. Like I said, I lived with my parents, and we had a lot of help. I ended up being the one to get up and feed the child or do whatever needed to be done all night, almost every night. My ex was a very heavy sleeper and genuinely just couldn't do it. My parents would get upset at me if I didn't do as much as they expected me to do during the day, but I had just been up all night, and parenting is supposed to be 50-50, I was happy to help out as much as I could, but at the time, I really needed help. Time went on, stuff happened, mistakes were made. I was still making a lot of mistakes and was yelling a lot. I had a ton of issues of my own, dealing with my own mental health. And I got married, and not long after I got married, my partner found out she was pregnant again. Now we're really screwed. It's my partner and I, my son, my mom and dad, my brother and sister, and 2 dogs in a house, and a cat. And it got really rough, as one can imagine. I was determined, though, this time to show that I had grown as a person. I was growing. I was still making mistakes, but I wanted to show that I was a lot more prepared this time. I took on 3 jobs. I had 3 jobs at one time. In the morning, around 1, between 12:30 and 1 in the morning, I would get up and I would deliver papers for about 5.5, 6 hours. After I was done, I would hop on the bus for my monitoring job. And after that was over for the day, I would drive to my 3rd job at a clothing store, coincidentally, where my wife also worked at the time. The newspaper job didn't last long. My car had started to have serious radiator issues and transmission issues, and I don't quote me on this, but I think the mechanic actually said that he found out the radiator imploded. I had to put over $3,000 worth of work into it, and we made the other 2 jobs work, but I just couldn't do the paper job anymore. Plus, it got to be too much. And the paper job was Sunday through Sunday. It was genuinely 7 days a week, no breaks. And with the other 2 jobs, I realized that I had overfilled my plate, So, like I said, we made the other 2 jobs work. And the clothing store job was seasonal anyway. So I was only there for a Christmas season. I started to get sick towards my end of the time there because I was so stressed out. I was getting sick in the bathroom and still working. I wasn't one to call out of work because I was sick because of my nerves. Like, that's not a reason to call out of work, One fateful day in December, via C-section, my daughter was born. She was a drama queen from the moment she entered the world. Around 3 a.m. the next morning, while my new baby was in the nursery, and while we were sleeping, a nurse came in and woke us up. She had informed us that my daughter had a very large heart murmur and was not keeping any formula down or breast milk down. I don't remember what she had. That's beside the point. My wife could not produce with my first kid, and I don't know. Anyway, beside the point. She had a very large heart murmur, and they were going to be transporting her via ambulance to the NICU at a hospital a few hours up north. I went with my daughter to the hospital, and I was prepared to stay with her as long as it took. I went up with a family friend at the time. My ex, however, had to stay in the original hospital and recover. Taking that baby away from her was one of the hardest things I ever had to witness. I assured my ex, though, that I would protect our daughter with my life, and I would not let anything happen to her. I had only been up in the NICU up north for about a day and a half. Of course, it felt like weeks. And the family room that they had didn't have any coffee. They had cocoa. I hadn't slept in like 3 days. Or that's what it felt like, In the end, it turned out my daughter had 2 small holes in one of the chambers of her heart. And if they did not heal by the time she was 4 months old, she would need heart surgery. So when she was actually cleared to go back to the original hospital, they transported her via ambulance. On the way back, we see the ambulance suddenly pull over on the side of the highway, and another ambulance pulls up behind it. At this point, I am losing my fucking mind. What is happening? What more could go wrong, It turns out that one of the nurses escorting my daughter had gotten car sick and passed out. They actually called another ambulance for the nurse. I remember she was so apologetic. She was so embarrassed. But honestly, I was just glad my daughter was okay. I told the nurse that too. I said it's not a big deal. I was so worried about my daughter, and she's okay, Still making mistakes, but getting better. We were all adjusting to the new baby. Now in one house, it was like I said, it was my stepdad, mom, sister, brother, pets, my wife, and the kids. My wife and I and the two kids shared one big room upstairs. We really had to make some serious adjustments, of course, but after a while, we actually started to get the hang of things. Of course, then we had the 4-month checkup to see if my daughter would need heart surgery. Thankfully, after 4 months of not being able to sleep for a few reasons, we could finally rest a bit because the holes had closed up on their own and she wouldn't be needing surgery. She would need a few checkups, down the road just to make sure she was okay, but she was in the clear, It was also a major help that my daughter was the kind of baby that slept through the night almost all the time. She was so laid back. When she's awake, she was a drama queen, but when she was sleeping, it was heaven. After a while, of course, we had to move out. We moved out on our own, like I had previously talked about. It was just the four of us now, my son had started to exhibit some behaviors that the therapists we had PT and we had OT, occupational therapy, speech therapy. We had 3 therapists come into the house, and he started to exhibit some signs and behaviors that could possibly pertain to autism. So we had him tested. He did not end up being diagnosed with autism, but rather with dyspraxia. Dyspraxia affects the ability to plan and coordinate physical movement. Children who suffer often struggle to speak clearly. They appear clumsy when walking, struggle holding a pencil, climbing a ladder, riding a bike. It affects life skills, academic performance, emotions, behavior, communication. We learned about it and realized it's kind of something you have to deal with as you go along. We like to plan ahead, and this was something that you couldn't really plan ahead for. You just had to be mindful and become educated and say, okay, well, what do we do now? How do we handle this? And take it day by day. Eventually, my daughter started exhibiting some of the same behaviors my son did in regards to autism, or possible autism. So we had her tested, and she was actually diagnosed with nonverbal autism spectrum disorder. This was a tough one for me to hear because in my mind, nonverbal meant I would never get to hear her say daddy. I would never get to hear her say I love you. Thankfully now, though, her vocabulary is incredible. It's growing every day thanks to this all-autism school she goes to in the mornings and then regular school in the afternoon. She has speech therapy every day. She knows all her colors, and I could go on forever. I'm so proud. She says I love you. She says daddy. She says all that, and I'm so proud, and I'm very thankful. I never get tired of hearing I love you, daddy, or even if she says daddy, daddy, daddy 1,000 times, I love it every single time. Both of my kids have had and will continue to have a massive impact on my life. It was only really after my divorce that I focused on being the best father that I could be. I say that because, when I was married, when we lived on our own, my job had really taken a toll on me. I was so miserable in my marriage, so miserable in general in my mental health, and my own mental illness can get in the way of parenting all the time. I'm on my own now, no parents living with us, no partner. It's just myself and my 2 children. It's BPD has affected how I do everything. I have BPD and I have depression, which is a real killer combination. For years, even before I had kids, I was so focused on keeping myself from going insane and hurting the people that I loved that really took up all my energy, took up all my time and energy, and no one knew at the time what was going on in my head. I kind of refused to let everybody in. No one could possibly understand anyway. That's how I felt. Parenting is an incredibly challenging job, even more so when you're struggling with your own mental illness, and to have 2 kids with disabilities of their own just it doesn't make it easier. But being a parent, being a full-time dad, is the most rewarding job I have ever had. I am so proud of my children for the progress that they make every day. It wasn't until my mental struggles were given a name, borderline personality disorder and depression, that things began to actually get a little bit easier. It's never going to be easy, and it's always going to be a struggle, but now that I knew what I was dealing with, I could figure out how to deal with it, how to manage it, It can never really be fully managed, but now I know why I used to react certain ways. Now I know why I still react those ways. As a parent with BPD, I have often had thoughts of doing things that are not right, or definitely not normal. And if you have those thoughts or have had those thoughts, I want you to know you're not alone, and it does not make you a bad person. I have had thoughts about leaving and running away. Even now, not nearly as much as I used to, but occasionally, if I'm having a rough day or it's been a rough week, I'll have that thought of like, I just don't want to do this anymore. When they were very little, my brain couldn't comprehend everything, and one of the major side effects of BPD is what's known as splitting countertransference, or splitting for short. To split something means divide it. Those with BPD tend to characterize themselves, other people, and situations in black and white. In other words, they may suddenly characterize people, objects, situations, beliefs as either all good or all bad. Nothing in the middle, not, it's all right. People with BPD often experience intense fears of abandonment and instability. And of course, to cope with these fears, they might use splitting as a defense mechanism. It's not something that is optional. It's not something that we can control. I'd like to point out again that I'm not speaking for everyone with BPD. I'm just sharing my own experiences. They use, like I said, they use it as a defense mechanism. This means that they might very cleanly separate positive and negative feelings about themselves, objects, other people, etc. For me, I mostly split with family more than anything else. Everyone is different, but I just want other people to not feel so alone. My goal is for someone to hear this and go, you know what, that's very relatable, or, oh my God, someone else has the same experiences and feelings I do. That's kind of my goal with this whole thing, I love my children, and I love my family, but when I split, it usually lasts a little while, but it's always temporary. 1 minute, I'll be fine with it, and the next minute, I want absolutely nothing to do with them. The last thing I want to do is see their face, talk to them, play with them. I want absolutely nothing to do. I get to a point where I can actually get very annoyed being around them, and that goes for other family members as well. My kids are around me almost 24/7, so they often get the most. I would never show or expose my kids to anything I'm feeling or experiencing, because as parents, it should be our job to shield them from this kind of stuff. It's hard for me to talk about this kind of thing, but I believe it's also very important. There are times where I can't stand the thought of being a parent anymore, or I don't want to play, see, talk, or do anything with the kids. It's very hard for me to talk about this, like I said, but I want, my goal with all these podcasts and blogging is that I want someone to be able to read this or hear this and know that they're not alone. You're not alone. These feelings do not make you a bad parent. You are struggling just as I am, and like I've said before, I want everyone to feel like they can reach out to me, borderlinedad@yahoo.com. shoot me an email. Let's chat. I can even do a Q&A podcast. I've had these feelings off and on for their entire lives. It never lasts long, but every time I have what I call an internal episode, like I said, I'm not going to ever expose them or show them what I'm really feeling, because they don't need that. My kids have been through enough, and they have enough to deal with already, like I said, I also suffer from depression, which comes with its own a host of issues. Every day I set my alarm 15 minutes before I actually have to get up. I do this to give myself time to mentally get ready for the day. And even doing this, I'm still not ready mentally sometimes until the kids are already at school. Side note, teachers do not get enough credit. They deserve more respect, higher pay, more recognition, especially the ones that had to deal with me. Anyway, during the week, I get up, and it takes me a good while to get out of bed. All the while contemplating, is it worth it? I've genuinely had days where I would consider calling the kids' schools and saying that they're going to be late just to give myself extra time. Really, because sometimes just getting out of bed is the hardest part. I then wake up. I wake the kids up. We go downstairs every day, and I do the following. I will change my daughter's pull-up. She's 5 and does not want to potty train, has refused every tactic, everything I've tried at home. She just wants nothing to do with the bathroom. Total meltdown. Occasionally the school gets her to go, but after a while I can't do it. So after I change her pull-up, I give my son his outfit for the day while I dress her. My son, thankfully, is at the age where if given an outfit, he can dress himself, put his own socks and shoes on, and his coat, his hat, gloves, whatever's needed. And that really helps me more than he'll ever know. I could go on for ages about how awesome my kids are. So after the kids are dressed, I get them breakfast. Most of the time, it's something super simple. Cereal, toast, frozen waffles that I'll heat up for them. On the weekends, I might be more inclined to do like scrambled eggs and toast or pancakes or something, whatever. But during the week, it's very simple, From the time I actually am able to drag myself out of bed to the time we have to go out the door is 45 minutes. So sometimes we take the easy route. Getting up is one of the hardest things, like I said, I do. And so you can imagine how difficult it can be getting them all ready every day by myself. Then I pack their lunch boxes. I put them in their backpacks. I would prep all this the night before, their outfits, their snacks, their lunches, whatever. But what some people don't realize is that by the end of the day, I'm just so done mentally that I don't want to watch, catch up on my favorite shows or play a video game or prep for the next day. I just want to go to bed. And even if I'm not sleeping, I just want to get away from the world. I'm done. I've done my bit. They're in bed. They've had a bath. They're in jammies. Their teeth are brushed, which is a whole nother struggle for my daughter. My son does really good with it, but that's just another thing we're dealing with. Typically after they go to bed, I kind of follow not long after. After everything is said and done, we head off to school. My son and daughter go to the same school. However, in the mornings, my daughter goes to that all-autism children's school, and we'll take a bus to the other school, around midday. Once they're off to school, all I really want to do every single day is go home, crawl back into bed until I come home. However, I have responsibilities. I go home typically after, and that's kind of when I shower, I clean myself up, and I really get ready for the day. I head to work. I work as an on-demand food delivery driver. I'm not going to say, what or where, but But essentially, all I have to do is log in and wait for a food order, and then I go pick it up at a restaurant, and I'll deliver it to you. Around 2, sometimes 2:15, I'll do the food delivery from, between 8:30 and 9 to around 2, sometimes 2:15 if it's a busy day. I'll go home, I'll wait for the kids to get off their respective buses. My daughter rides the short bus and tends to come home an hour later than my son, so that kind of gives my son and I a little one-on-one time, which, again, one-on-one time is so important, but it's also very hard when you're in my situation. So, every day when my son gets off the bus, he wants to play a video game with me. So, after homework or whatever needs to be done, we play whatever he wants, within reason. Typically, it's Roblox, Minecraft, stuff like that. He will play on his iPad, and I've connected things so that I can play with him, but on my Xbox. You'd think this would be one of my favorite parts of the day, but sometimes it's not. That feeling isn't every day, but sometimes I just don't want anything to do with any of them. Sometimes when they come home, all I want them to do is go in their rooms after homework, because homework is important. I didn't do it as much as I should have, and I paid for it. But anyway, I don't sometimes want to do a damn thing. And, it can be rough. That you had a curse put on you by an evil witch. You have a giant list of obligations, chores, things that you have to get done. Now imagine every time you go to do any of those things, even if it's something as simple as putting a new roll of toilet paper on the thing, cleaning the tub, making your bed, something kind of simple, the curse would activate, and you would suddenly get super, really ridiculously overtired and just feel like you weigh 1,000,000 pounds. But once you've done the thing, or you give up and say, fine, I won't do it, or I'll put it off, suddenly you feel 100% better, back to normal. This is what every day feels like to me. Every single day. Being a single parent of 2 young children with disabilities, it is more important than ever to keep your emotions in check. And even when you're having a meltdown or just screaming inside, to keep everything internal. Don't freak out. Don't let your kids, have to suffer like you do. Or be a side effect of that, be a casualty of that. This doesn't, unfortunately, always happen, though. There will be times, unfortunately, when the splitting shows, or, when your inner struggles come out in full force, and it's horrible, and it's regrettable, and it's not something I would wish on anyone, but it happens. It's part of what we have to deal with. All you got to do, really, is, work your hardest to make sure that doesn't happen again, or that it doesn't happen as frequently. There have been several times where, I've sat down with my son and explained to him that sometimes Daddy gets upset, Daddy gets upset, or he gets really sad, and I'm really sorry. I sit there and I reassure him that I love him with all my heart, and it's impossible for them to understand what's going on in your head, the struggles that you have to suffer with every day, and that's okay, because they shouldn't have to worry about any of that stuff. It can affect day-to-day life, and all we can really do is just continue fighting and managing, learning new ways to deal with the storm inside our heads. When someone asks how I would describe myself, the first thing I say is always, I'm a father. I wouldn't know what to do without my children. They've saved my life. When my son was born, a journey began. A long, painful journey, but in the end, it would make me a better father and all-around better human being. They inspire me to want to do better. They are my reasons for getting up in the morning. If I didn't have them, I'd probably just spend most days laying in bed not doing anything, just wasting away. Self-care is something that I'll get into next time. It is so important in being a better person, being a better father, My grandmother always says that you can't take care of others if you don't take care of yourself first. This all goes back to family as well. And what I had said about the 5-year question. Whatever's bugging you about someone or something, is it really going to matter in 5 years? My family have been so unbelievably important in my growth as a person and as a father. Without them, I wouldn't be here. And I certainly wouldn't be the person I am today. Everyone I've encountered, good and bad, have had impacts on my life. My ex, for example, has made me realize my mistakes and how I can grow as a partner. And it made me explore how BPD can make relationships almost impossible. I am currently dating a wonderful, amazing woman, and my biggest fear is messing up, saying something or doing something wrong and scaring her off. I love her very much, but I'm afraid if my BPD gets out of hand or I have an episode where I'm unable to internalize my emotions, she might run. Time will tell, though. It always does. I have been through quite a bit in my life, and another thing that I wanted to bring up is that just because someone else is struggling, that should not invalidate your own struggles or feelings. I have people that I know personally that are struggling with their own things, much worse things than what I'm dealing with, but that should not minimize the importance of the struggle. That should not minimize who you are, what you're going through. And just because someone else is going through something far worse or even similar, never let that diminish how you feel or how you deal with things. Because it's in those moments where something happens, how we choose to deal with it, it's up to us. It's up to us how we deal with it and how we let it affect our lives, how we hopefully not let it affect our children. My father has had anger issues. He's had his own host of mental illnesses and struggles. And in my early days of parenting, I would let that affect me, or I would make excuses for it. My father, like I said, had an anger issue, and so I would get angry quite often as a parent, or if my kid did the slightest thing wrong, I would fly off the handle. I had a real problem, and it's true what they say. If you want to fix a problem, if you want to get better, the best thing you can do, and the first step, is to admit that there is a problem. Admit that you do have an issue, and your issue is scarring these children. Your issue is affecting these children, and you got to do something before you do some serious damage to them. I look at my children every day. I look at my son especially, and sometimes I can see the sadness in his eyes. And I know that even though he's only 7, he knows more and understands more than I could ever comprehend now, or even at that age. I look at him and I think about when I used to scream at him. And it makes me sick to my stomach. It makes me so sick that I used to do those things. And I never hit him, but yelling and screaming is just as bad. And then when his mother left, it was around a time where his life should be celebrated, and yet it wasn't. we were all so focused on what had just happened. She had just abandoned us. And he remembers, he won't say anything, but every year around that time where his life should be celebrated, he starts acting out. He gets sad. He just, you just know what's going on in his head. And I have done everything in my power to get better, to better understand what he's going through, what I'm going through, what we're all going through, and how to best deal with that. He's in therapy now. I went to therapy. The other thing is that much like when my brother passed, I had a lot of guilt. I focused on the past. Guilt, regret, it's all poison. It's hard for me not to look at my son and just instantly cry and regret and just not think about, me yelling and screaming at a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old. Like, it's not okay, but I have to focus on not just my son, but my daughter as well. And I have to focus on myself. I have to focus on what I can do to be a better parent, be a better father, how I can prevent myself from going back to those ways. I just wanted to let you know that if you've ever had any of these feelings, it's okay. Because I've had them too. And you're not alone. If you've made it this far and you've listened to this whole thing and you've listened to all these podcasts, I appreciate you. I love you. I want you to know you are not alone. Please email me if you want to talk, if you need to vent. I want this to be an interactive experience. And like I said before, I want to grow and be big and inspire people. I want to be like Tiffany Jenkins. I want to be like DeSocia did. I want to be like all these people, Shane Dawson, but if I can just make one person who listens to this or one person who reads my blog feel not so alone, then that's an absolute win in my book. I love you all. Always with the love. Borderline Dad.